Most capital cities tend to be found close to coastal areas. But why is this? Well, being near the coast makes trade and transportation easier due to access to the seas and oceans. Coastal regions also offer access to important resources like fish, which in turn supports the local economy and people. There are countless other reasons why capitals usually end up being by the coast, but this isn't always the case. There are still many capital cities who are found rather inland, and in some cases nowhere near a sea or ocean whatsoever. So let's go through some of the most noteworthy inland capital cities from around the world. So let's start off with North America's most inland capital city. Can you guess which capital it is? Well, most North American countries are island nations, like those found in the Caribbean. Then you've also got the region classed as Central America. However, this region is rather narrow, meaning most capitals are probably rather close to the Atlantic or Pacific. So that leaves us with the capital of perhaps Mexico, the US, or Canada being the most inland. Well, Mexico City is found quite inland. It's kind of in the center of the part of the country that it's found in. It is actually some 246 kilometers away from the coast. However, this still does not make it the most inland North American capital, as that belongs to Ottawa of Canada. The Canadian capital is found in the east of southern Ontario, not far from the border with the US. It is found some 476 kilometers away from the coast. But why exactly is it found so inland? Well, in the 19th century, leaders wanted the capital to be more defensible against possible coastal attacks. Placing it inland also helped compromise between competing cities like Toronto and Montreal. Ottawa's location on the Ottawa River still allowed for transportation and trade, making it a strategic choice as the capital of Canada. So although it's found rather inland, its position is rather strategic and makes somewhat complete sense. Oceania is an interesting region when it comes to inland capitals, as pretty much every country there is an island, with the majority being very small. So even if a country's capital was found slap bang in the middle of the country, as most countries here are islands and or small, it would still technically be found quite close to the coast. In fact, the capital cities of countries in Oceania are all so close to the coast that we have to actually measure the distance from their parliament building to get an actual objective measurement. For example, Papua New Guinea's capital, Port Moresby, is found on the coast. However, its parliament building is some 5.2 kilometers away from the open water, which incredibly is the second furthest in the whole of Oceania. In third place we have Garulmud, the capital of Palau, whose parliament building, which suspiciously looks like the White House, is just over a kilometer away from the coast. However, the capital city which is found furthest inland in all of Oceania is Canberra of Australia. Now, most of Australia's urban centres are found exactly on the coast, like say Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Cairns and Brisbane. However, the capital, Canberra, is found some 109 kilometres inland, kind of in between Sydney and Melbourne. Until 1960, Rio de Janeiro was the capital of Brazil. It was then moved to the new city of Brasilia, to which it is the current capital. Now, Rio is of course a coastal city, meaning the Brazilian government made a conscious decision to move its capital further inland. And not just by a little bit, but in fact by over 900 kilometers. But why exactly? Surely this isn't beneficial for the country and its capital's growth. Well, the reason why Brazil did this was for strategic and development reasons. The government aimed to promote the development of the interior regions and reduce the concentration of political and economic power in the coastal areas. If we exclude the region where the Amazon rainforest is found, where not too many people live, then Brasilia is kind of central-ish in the country. Asunción, the capital city of Paraguay, comes in a close second for the most inland South American capitals. It is found some 900 kilometers away from the coast. Paraguay is indeed a landlocked country, meaning it is impossible to have a coastal capital city. To make matters worse, Asunción is found in the west of the southern part of the country, on the border with Argentina. If the capital was found in the east of the country, it could have been a couple of 100 kilometers closer to the coast, with only Brazil blocking its access. Sucre, one of two of Bolivia's capital cities, is also found rather inland, some 522 kilometers. Again, just like Paraguay, Bolivia is a landlocked country, meaning its capital could never be a coastal city, well, in its current form. Sucre, which is the country's constitutional capital, is also found rather inland in the country itself. It is found some 370 kilometers inland from its western border with Chile. On a bit of a side note, Paraguay and Bolivia, as just mentioned, are the only two landlocked countries in the entire Americas. That's just 2 out of 35 countries with no direct ocean access. Bogota and Quito of Colombia and Ecuador respectively are the two next most inland capitals in South America. Alright, this is where the numbers start to get crazy, with the most inland capitals found in Asia. At over 44 million kilometers squared, Asia is by far the world's largest continent. It is in fact so large that it accounts for around 30% of all land on Earth, as well as around 60% of the entire human population. Across this continent there are many countries, lots of space and plenty of landlocked countries, which in turn gives us some huge distances for capitals found distant from the coast. So the 5th most inland capital in Asia is found further inland than any other capital mentioned so far in this video. Ulaanbaatar, the capital of Mongolia, is found some 1,300 kilometers inland. Mongolia, after all, is a very large landlocked country sandwiched in between China and Russia. Dushanbe, the capital of Tajikistan, is another capital city found super far inland. It is found some 1,478 kilometers away from the coast. Coincidentally, about the same distance, that's nearly 1,500 kilometers north, you will find Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan, who is even further away from the coast, at some 1,661 kilometers, which ranks them as the 3rd most inland capital in Asia and in fact the world. So excluding Ulaanbaatar of Mongolia, we've had one Central Asian Stan country's capitals. Can you guess where the final 2 most inland capitals are? Yep, they are both found within the Central Asian Stan region, being Tashkent and Bishkek of Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. They are found some 1,784 and 2,081 kilometers away from the coast respectively. This means that Bishkek of Kyrgyzstan is the most inland capital city on Earth. The capital is found in the north of the country, not far from the border with Kazakhstan. The Eurasian pole of inaccessibility, which is the point on land on Earth furthest from the ocean, is found around here, in northwestern China, near the border with Kazakhstan. The closest capital city is Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan's capital, which makes complete sense, as it is the single most inland capital city on Earth. Let's now fly some 6,000 kilometers southwest, where we'll end up in the city of Juba. Can you guess which country this city is the capital of? I'll give you a clue. It is the youngest country in the world, and by youngest I don't mean by the average age of its citizens, but the actual creation of the country. It is South Sudan. So at 1,270 kilometers, Juba is the most inland capital city in Africa. It is found in the southern part of the country, which in itself is found central eastern-ish Africa. Some 2,000 kilometers northwest, you will find N'Djamena, the capital city of Chad, who comes in a close second at some 1,100 kilometers away from the coast. The main difference between these two cities and their relationship with their distance to the ocean is that Juba is closer to the Indian Ocean, whereas N'Djamena is closer to the Atlantic. Some 2,200 kilometers southeast of Chad's capital, you will find Kigali, the capital of Rwanda. This capital city is the 3rd most inland in Africa, at around 1,050 kilometers. I have no idea why, but I've always really liked the name Kigali. I don't know, it just kind of flows off the tongue quite nicely. And finally, let's move on to our final continent, Europe. Before I reveal the most inland capitals, can you think of which city is going to rank number 1? Well, Europe is a super interesting one. The 5th, 4th, 3rd and 2nd most inland capitals only have a 7-kilometer difference between how far away they all are from the coast. Those capitals being Budapest, Minsk, Prague and Kiev at 422, 426, 427 and 429 kilometers respectively. However, the European capital who ranks as the most inland in Europe belongs to Moscow, at nearly double of the figures just stated, 828 kilometers. Now, I know Russia is a transcontinental country stretching across both Europe and Asia. However, its capital Moscow does sit in the European part of the country. So there we have it, the most inland capital cities on Earth. If you can think of any other capitals with interesting geographical positions, please do let us know in the comments below. And as always, thank you very much for watching.